I was just sitting here thinking about trucking over the years and all the companies I've worked for, and I went through a period where I jumped companies a lot. And I still do sometimes. It just depends on what's going on, and I know a lot of drivers do. Some drivers will stay, but a lot of drivers do jump companies quite a bit. There's more movement among employees in trucking than probably any industry that I know of. Like when I worked construction, I worked for the same two companies. I worked for Greg Industrial Insulators out of Longview, Texas, and I worked for Thermon out of Houston. And I just went back and forth between those two companies. When Greg was out of work, they would offer everybody a layoff, and instead of taking a layoff, I would just go to work for Thermon. And I'd work for Thermon until they ran out of work, and then I'd go back to Greg. But it'd be a couple years at each company, right? There wasn't near as much movement as there is in trucking. It's like in trucking, there's a lot of movement. And I was sitting here trying to wrap my head around why. Why is there so much movement in trucking? Why do drivers change jobs so much? And I look at myself and look at the overall picture, thinking back on it. And it's hard to pinpoint any one reason because it's many reasons, but it comes down to money. I mean, obviously, it all comes down to money in the end, money or home time. But there's many reasons, like I worked for a company one time that paid percentage, but they wouldn't tell us what the load was paying until after we were done. I mean, sometimes you didn't know what the load paid till you got your paycheck. And at first, it wasn't a big deal because I was making money, so I was like, whatever, this works. I'm making money, my bills are getting paid. But then after a while, the money started going down. Well, then it became a problem, right? Well, now I'm not making money, and I'm hauling loads all week and not knowing what they're paying, which is one of the reasons I'm scared to death of percentage. I don't like percentage because I've been burned on it a couple of different times. I got burned on it years ago at Celadon. I leased a truck and went on percentage there. But some of the lowest paying money I ever made was working on percentage. And I know some guys out there will only work percentage, and they swear by it. But I don't know. I just never made any money doing it. So I always liked cents per mile because I can equate exactly what I'm making, if that makes sense to you. If you tell me how many cents per mile I'm getting paid, you tell me how many miles you're paying on the load, I know exactly what I'm getting paid all the time. And it doesn't go up and down from load to load. I'm not going to make 26 cents a mile on this load, 58 cents a mile on the next load. Because with percentage, that's the way it is. It goes up and down. So I know how many miles I need to make for the week in order to make a paycheck that I need to pay my bills and survive on. And that's why I always like cents per mile as compared to that. Hourly's okay. I work hourly right now, and hourly's all right, but I've always made more money on cents per mile than I do on hourly. If you know what I'm saying? Nobody's going to pay you as much per hour as what you'll make with cents per mile. Hourly's good though because like when you break down or you're stuck on the side of the road or you're getting fuel, you get paid for all that, right? But what's crazy is, and I've worked hourly a bunch of different times, what's crazy is I make more money on cents per mile. I always have. And I've done videos. If you go back through my videos, I've got videos where I broke it down. And I've showed my paychecks whenever I was working on hourly and cents per mile. I've always made more money on cents per mile than on hourly. In order to make as much money on hourly as you do on cents per mile, there's an equation to break it down. So, like if you're making 60 cents per mile, you're going to have to make about $28 to $30 an hour hourly in order to make the same money, or like when I was at Poly, I was making 70 cents per mile. My pay would have to be like, and I'm not going to do the math, but just off the top of my head, it'd have to be somewhere around 34, 35 an hour in order to equate to 70 cents per mile. And most companies that pay by the hour, especially down where I live at, they're not going to pay that. Fuel haulers don't even make that down here. I talked to a fuel hauling company the other day. They pay 26 right here in San Antonio. 26 an hour is what they pay. There's a construction company hiring for a fueler. I think it's Austin. They pay 27. And that's the highest I've found in my area is 27 an hour. Most of the trucking companies here, local, getting paid by the hour, are between 21 and 24, right in that area. Whether it's hazmat, whether it's dry van, whether it's flatbed, that's what they're at, 21 to 24, which equates to a driver on cents per mile that's doing about, probably 41 cents per mile, something like that. That's about what they're making. Maybe a little less than that. But I know hourly sounds great, but it doesn't pan out unless they're going to make the hourly rate high enough. They'd have to get above $30 an hour for it to be worth it. But anyway, back to my original point. My ADD got me. So all off on this tangent here about hourly pay and all that crap. why do drivers swap companies so much? A lot of it's lies. These companies will lie to you, and you can't do anything about it. And I'm gonna give you an example. When I first came into trucking 15 years ago, I went to Stevens Transport. At that time, Stevens Transport was advertising first year drivers could make, and this is where they get you, up to 40,000 a year. All of the companies that didn't train at that time were advertising up to 60. Most of your training companies back then were advertising up to 40. And that was decent money back then. I was making about 40, 45, maybe 50 in construction before coming into trucking. So it was going to be about the same. But in reality, as a company driver at Stevens Transport back then, you struggled to make 20,000. I mean, you got to remember, I started out at 26 cents a mile. That's a whole lot of miles to come to $40,000 for the year, right? It was a struggle to make 20. There's a lot of downtime involved with reefer freight. You get out in California, you might spend 2 days in the same town making picks, picking up produce. Or maybe you go to the meat patch in Kansas and you sit for 4 days waiting for a meat load to come out to pick up. So there's a lot of downtime in refrigerated freight. I don't know how it is now. It's been a few years since I ran refrigerated freight. But back then, there was a lot of downtime in refrigerated freight. And in my opinion, I was always mad because it's like, well, they advertised wrong. That's false advertising. I lived on the road when I first came out. When I first started driving trucks, that first year, I ran 8 months straight one time without any home time. And then when I did take home time, I'd only take 2 or 3 days, and I'd go right back at it. My first year, I only went home once or twice. But I remember one time I ran like 8 months straight. So 40,000 was pretty dang near to not obtainable, period, as a company driver. But you can't take them to court and say, well, they false advertised. Because all Stevens has to do in court with their lawyer is sit down and say, okay, well, if you ran 2,600 miles every single week, yada, 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 or 2,800 miles every single week, then yes, you would make this amount. That's why we say up to this amount, because that's what you'd need to run it. You're running refrigerated freight at Stevens back then, especially. You weren't going to get that every week. You might have a 3,000 mile week, and then you'd have a 2,200 mile week, and then you'd have a 2,400 mile week. I mean, it was up and down. And if you took any time off, you might only get 1,000 miles or 1,500 miles the week you took a couple of days off. So you were never going to average high enough to make what was required. Not only that, but they dispatch you. As a driver, especially as a company driver, you're not in full control of your paycheck. I know a lot of guys will say, well, I'm in control of my paycheck. Not really. Your company dispatches. Now, if you end up in the right lane and they got the right miles and all that kind of stuff, then yeah, you can do really good. But any little thing can happen. Any little thing can throw your whole week off. Trucking is just like that. You can have a breakdown, throws your whole week off. They could give you a load going to a spot where they don't have any other freight, and you might sit there a day, and throws your whole week off. Or I'm going to use an example from Crete Carriers. Now, I love Crete Carriers. They are an awesome company, and I would recommend them to anybody. They are a great company to work for. I worked there 7 years off and on. I mean, and I'd probably go back to them today, to be honest with you, but they are a really good company. But there are times at Crete Carriers that I had really horrible weeks because you're not in full control. Crete Carriers has a Walmart fleet. When I hired on to Crete Carriers, I hired on as an OTR driver. I did not hire on as a Walmart driver. I wasn't on their Walmart fleet. But what Crete Carriers does, and I think it's in their paperwork, if I'm not mistaken, I think I signed a piece of paper saying that I would cover Walmarts as needed. And they do that to everybody as needed. So if they were short-handed on a Walmart, like they almost always were in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and Pauls Valley, those two Walmarts, Pauls Valley, Oklahoma, and Cheyenne, Wyoming, they were almost always short. If you delivered anywhere near one of those two places, you were almost guaranteed to end up doing a week or two, maybe 3 weeks on the Walmart fleet. You talk about kill your paycheck. Oh my God. I'd go from making 1,600 to 1,800 or 1,900, a week to making 700, 800, 900 a week. I mean, it was just horrible. Them Walmart fleets killed my paychecks. But I would do them. At first, I would try to do them. And after a while, they kind of got to where they would take advantage, because if you would do it and not gripe, well, they would leave you on it. Like one time, they put me on Pauls Valley. I was in Pauls Valley 2.5 weeks, and I took home time thinking that'd get me off the fleet. Like, hey, put in for home time. I go home. Before I even came off of home time, Paul's Valley was calling me because they were going to put me right back on that Walmart fleet. And ironically, I quit. That's the last time I quit Crete Carriers. I drug up. I said, enough's enough. I ain't doing this because it killed my paychecks. Literally, it would make it hard for you to pay your bills sometimes. And that's why I didn't like it. So even at a company like Crete where the pay is really good when the freight's there and you're doing your job you hired on for, you can end up in a bind. You can mess your whole month up running a Walmart fleet, so I think it's stuff like that that causes drivers to change companies a lot. It's the lies, it's the struggling to make a living at certain times, companies doing certain things that make it hard on you to make a living, or I know your driver manager can have a lot to do with it, because I've had really good driver managers, I've had really bad driver managers, or dispatchers, or asset managers, whatever they want to call them wherever you work at. If you have a really good one, that can make your time at a company a lot better. But if you have a bad one, it can make you want to quit every single day. Safety is another reason I think drivers quit companies a lot. What's always blown my mind about these trucking companies, not all of them, but most of them, the safety person you deal with has never driven a truck. Everything they know about driving a truck, they learned from a book, or they learned from being told, or they just use their own common sense to what makes sense to them, right? And if they did drive a truck, they may have went and got a CDL, and maybe they rode with a driver for a week or two, to kind of get an idea. Companies do it differently for their safety. But at most companies, your safety person has never driven a truck. And it used to drive me insane that a person who's never done my job, they don't know anything about my job, is going to tell me what I'm doing right or wrong in my job. And that's the same thing with a dispatcher or an asset manager. Most of them never driven a truck, and it used to drive me insane when they would say, well, it's only 800 miles, so you should be there tomorrow about 9 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, in a perfect world, I would be there tomorrow about 9 o'clock in the morning. But right now, 70% of the country is under road construction. You don't know if you're going to run into an accident in the road construction. Is there parking near this location? Where's the nearest place I'm going to be able to park? Where am I going to park at tonight? That may adjust what time I get there. Especially these companies that won't let you park certain places. They only want you to park in designated locations. That makes it real hard. So there's a lot of factors that a dispatcher, if they've never driven before, they don't consider. They look at the numbers, and they look at the numbers, say that's doable, and you should be here then. And that used to drive me insane, because it's like, and then when you're 2 or 3 hours later to what they thought you'd be there, what happened? It was always their question, what happened? Well, what happened is reality is what happened. Reality is you've never driven a truck before. Yes, in a car, it's not a big deal. In a car, it's easy to make it at a certain time. A car, you can jump on any road. If you've got a wreck on the highway, you don't have to worry about it. You can jump off any exit and go around it. In a truck, you got to worry about what exits you get off of. You got to make sure you can route around it and all that kind of stuff. So it's different. It's different in a truck than it is in a car. And I think that's the reason that a lot of guys switch companies a lot. These companies will tell you can make a certain amount of money that in reality, they probably don't have anybody making that money there. If they do, it might be 1 or 2 drivers. Maybe that have been there a really long time and kind of figured out the system, and since they have a driver or 2 doing it, they'll claim that you can make that amount of money there. But I've learned over the years, you can't chase anyone else's money. Many times in trucking, someone else is, a friend of mine or somebody I talked to or somebody I met in orientation somewhere, stayed in contact with, they'll tell me what they're making somewhere, and I'll get up, quit, and run over there, try to make that same money, right? And I've just found you can't, you're never going to do it. You can't chase anyone else's money. You have to find your own niche, your own way of doing it, your own work-life balance, what fits you. You can't up and chase someone else's money, because you may or may not make what they're making when you get there. You don't live in the same area they live in. You're probably not going to end up on the same lane they're on. There's so many factors involved in that. And I call it chasing rainbows, chasing the pot of gold at the end of rainbows, right? A lot of times as drivers, we hear they're making a lot of money somewhere. I know a couple years ago it was GP Transco. Everybody was running to GP Transco. And some guys were doing okay over there. Some weren't, but it was people chasing someone else's money, right? That's just like I did really well at Crete when I wasn't on the Walmart fleet. But I can't tell you that you're going to go there and do that. I did 100,000, 102 the last year I was at Crete. but I can't tell you you're going to go there and do that. There's too many factors involved in it. You might live right next to Paul's Valley and end up on Paul's Valley all the dang time. You're never going to make 100,000. You're not going to make 60,000 if you get stuck on the Walmart fleet too many times. You might not even make 50. So you can't chase the money I made at Crete. Just like I can't chase the money someone else made over there. But I think as drivers, we need to communicate with each other more. And we need to communicate with each other more honestly, because I found a lot of times drivers will lie to you to try to get that hire on bonus. I've had drivers flat out lie to me, and I knew they were lying. I didn't go there because I knew they were full of crap. They were bullshitting, trying to get that bonus. I'll tell you something else that kind of trips me out. If you get online right now and you look at tanker jobs, flatbed jobs, dry van jobs, or reefer jobs, OTR, just go across the board, OTR or regional, they all pay about the same. A flatbed job's paying pretty close to the same as what a dry van job is paying. And I just find that kind of awkward. It's like, why would a person go run flatbed when they can make literally the same money bumping docks? Why would I go throw tarps and go through all that work to make the same amount of money I would bumping docks? Why would I haul a hazmat tanker behind me, take a chance on somebody hurting me or killing me, the motoring public being stupid out here on their phones running into my tank? For the same money, I can go bump docks and swing doors. Don't make any sense. It used to not be like that. When I first started trucking, car haulers made the most, which they still do. Car haulers make a little bit more. Hazmat tankers were right after that, pretty close to it. Flatbed was right after that. Reefer was right after that. And then dry van was your lowest paid. That's the way it was when I first started trucking. But over the years, it's all kind of leveled out. And it doesn't matter what you do. It all pays about the same. The only thing I can attribute to that is there's so many people with a CDL now that they know they can find drivers to run it, because there's drivers that are going to live near those terminals or live near where this flatbed company is or live near where this tanker company is. They want to get more home time. So they know that they can pay a little less and they're going to get the drivers they need. Where back in the day, there wasn't as many drivers. It was harder. So those jobs that were more dangerous or required more physical labor, they paid a little more. It just ain't the case anymore. That's just my own theory. I don't know what y'all's theory is out there. Well, I was just sitting here this morning and brainstorming on this. I mean, that's really all this is brainstorming, BS. And I thought I'd put my thoughts out there and see what y'all thought about it. See what y'all's idea is on why drivers change companies so much. Is it unrealistic expectations on the driver's part? Could be that. I know there's been times myself when I've had unrealistic expectations, and as drivers, we get frustrated pretty easy. It doesn't take a lot of BS, and we just get tired of dealing with it, right? Our tempers get short, especially when we've been on the road a little while. And when I've been on the road a few weeks, and then you throw a kink in my plan, I lose my shit. I get mad, so, and that might attribute to a lot of why drivers change companies so much. Anyway, if you're new to the channel, smash that like and subscribe button. I appreciate it. I appreciate all of you that hang out and kind of BS with me here or listen to my opinion on things. Y'all take care, stay safe. Remember, we are all family out here, even if we don't always get along. So let's keep trucking.